An explosive full moon eclipse in Pisces. My name is Archie Dunlop. This is Talking Astrology with Archie, and it is Friday, August the 28th, 2026. Today, or perhaps yesterday evening in some parts of the United States, there is a full moon eclipse, and I regard this eclipse as being pretty important, indeed potentially explosive. After all, this eclipse is aspected by the planet Uranus. In this video, I will start by having a sort of a broad overview of the day's astrology. Then I will look at the eclipse in detail, and then I'll go through the 12 signs, considering how the eclipse might impact each one, and I will finish this video with an I Ching reading. So let's start off by looking at the overall picture for today, Friday, August the 28th, 2026. So here is the chart set for noon New York time on Friday, August the 28th. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So looking at this chart, the moon is in Pisces. There it is. Moon is at 11 degrees 9 minutes Pisces at noon on August the 28th for New York time. So the actual eclipse, certainly set for New York, is much earlier in the day. In fact, if you do set the chart for New York, you find that the eclipse takes place actually just after midnight today. Really early. And if you're in California, it would be yesterday evening, but it doesn't matter. The point is, all of us feel the eclipse energy, wherever we are. So there is the moon in Pisces. The moon is obviously opposition the sun and opposition Mercury. So we've got a conjunction between the sun and Mercury. Now that sun-Mercury conjunction was exact yesterday, and in Virgo. So there is a big sort of Virgo emphasis at the moment. Well, certainly big. I mean, the sun and Mercury both in Virgo. That does indicate that Virgo is a sign that is important. When we think about Virgo, it's an earth sign. We think about details, making sure that everything is covered, focusing perhaps on the material and financial side of things. But then the moon is opposition of the sun and Mercury. Of course, the definition of a full moon is when the sun is opposition the moon. And so the moon in Pisces represents a different way of looking at things. We can focus on the material details and on surface appearances, all we like, but is that the whole picture? And Pisces is suggesting that we go further, that we perhaps look at things on a more emotional level, that we're able to deal with a fair amount of confusion. And the moon, having made this opposition to the sun, it moves on and makes a trine to the Mars. Now that trine to Mars, it seems relatively trivial compared with some of the other things going on today, but it could be about sort of agency. Moon trine Mars is about action, our agency. We can actually make things happen. So it could be that, having experienced this eclipse and the drama of the eclipse, some of us, we might not know what to do. What do we do next? How do we respond to the situation? But the moon trine Mars is perhaps providing some kind of solution. We should be able to take action. Now, there are other aspects to consider. Mercury is making a square to Uranus. Again, you've got Mercury in Virgo. Mercury in Virgo likes things to be relatively straightforward in an Earth sign, but Uranus, is the planet of revolutions and turmoil and earthquakes, and so Uranus represents something that Mercury in Virgo may not quite be able to handle. So Mercury in Virgo has perhaps got to be aware that it hasn't necessarily got all the answers. And we also have the Sun making a square to Uranus. So that whole Sun-Mercury conjunction making a square to Uranus, that is why I think that today could be explosive. Okay, as ordinary individuals, it's unlikely, all things being equal, to be such a dramatic day, but things might happen that we really hadn't expected. And it's not just about events, it's about our reaction. So with the Sun and Mercury square Uranus, something might happen which might be relatively trivial, but our response may actually be quite extreme. So perhaps it's important that we don't overreact. And if we see other people, being rather, over the top, maybe they are overreacting. Additionally, we have Venus making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. So Venus is making a 135-degree aspect to Uranus, and there are a number of ways of looking at that. I mean, Venus can be about art, and it can be about creativity. So from an artistic point of view, Venus sesquiquadrate Uranus may be able to create things which are sort of weird, wonderful, and in their own way quite outstanding. But Venus can be the planet of relationships, and so other people's behavior and reactions might be difficult to predict, as I've already suggested. Now, I do want to go into this eclipse in some detail. But first of all, I just wanted to quickly look at the positions of the planets if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia. I also want to look at the heliocentric picture. So if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is at 3 degrees Pisces at noon. So, this eclipse in Australasia and East Asia will take place really in the middle of the day, maybe sort of the early afternoon. And so this eclipse could actually be quite immediate if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Very often when I talk about Australia and New Zealand, I'm kind of having to say, okay, yeah, you have this big event, but in fact it's not until tomorrow or something like that. But yeah, this eclipse is definitely today. It's right in the middle of the day. And so, you get the full power of the eclipse today. You don't have to wait. And so I don't think I need to explain this eclipse to you, because I'm just about to talk about this eclipse. And then we have the heliocentric view. If we put the sun at the center of the solar system, and as I have been sort of mentioning over the last few days, Mars has been making a conjunction to Uranus, and so in Gemini. So this is a heliocentric conjunction, not something geocentric. And you might say, oh well, yeah, but this Mars-Uranus conjunction is 6 degrees apart. But look at the Earth. The Earth is just separating from a square to Uranus. It's moving to a square of Mars, and the Mars-Uranus midpoint is at about 5 degrees 30. Yeah, because there's 6. You see, there's 6 degrees. But Uranus and Mars are 6 degrees apart, so half of 6 is 3. So the midpoint is about 5 degrees 30, 37, 38. So the Earth is exactly square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And additionally, we have got Mercury making a square to Mars. So we do have a heliocentric T-square. And it does involve Mars and Uranus. And I've talked about this eclipse in terms of it being explosive, and I think that the heliocentric chart is also quite explosive, and so it might well be a dramatic day, because the heliocentric chart seems to pick up what's going on geocentrically. So there is quite a lot of drama in the air. So turning to the eclipse itself. So here it is. I've set this for New York. So it takes place at 12:18 a.m. So just after midnight today, Friday, Eastern Standard Time, the eclipse is exact, at least in a zodiacal sense. The moon is at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. The sun is at 4 degrees 54 Virgo. And so if you're in California, it would have been 3 hours earlier. So it would be would actually have been at 9:18 p.m. At the end of Thursday, or same for British Columbia or Oregon or Washington State. So I think that a lot of astrologers are very excited about this eclipse for good reason. Because it is tied up with Uranus. There is Uranus at 5 degrees 37 Gemini. So the moon is square Uranus, the sun is square Uranus, and Venus as well. Venus is at 20 degrees 2 Libra. So that means that Venus is making a semi-square to the sun, and it's making a sesquiquadrate to the moon. So this eclipse doesn't just bring in Uranus, it also brings Venus. So we've got the sun, moon, Uranus and Venus really sort of tied in with each other. The Venus influence might not be immediately obvious, but you can see how they're connected if I just show you the eighth harmonic. So an eighth harmonic is a chart which brings together the conjunctions, the oppositions, the squares, the semi-squares, the squares and sesquiquadrates, and makes them all conjunctions. So let me just show you the eighth harmonic quickly to show you what I mean. There it is. So when we do the eighth harmonic chart, look at these 5 planets: the moon, sun, Venus, Mercury, Uranus, all within a 5-degree arc. Now 5 degrees might sound quite a lot, but this is an eighth harmonic chart. So when you do an eighth harmonic, the differences between planets get multiplied by 8. So that's why it seems to be in a wider arc. But I would argue that this is actually quite a powerful full moon eclipse because you have got 5 planets really tied up with each other. Of course, it's Mercury's involved as well. So this is why a lot of astrologers are getting really excited about this full moon, and why they think that it might actually be absolutely dramatic, game changer. You can get into as much hyperbole and exaggeration as you like. That our life will not be the same after this full moon eclipse. It's unlikely to be that dramatic, and that is always the issue with astrology. That you notice this huge event and you get excited about it, and you wait, and it just seems really dramatic, and then it happens, and it's not quite as dramatic as you'd expected. But certainly on paper, this eclipse does really seem to be a big deal, and really does change everything. So when you're talking about a full moon, a full moon in general, let me just take us back to the normal chart. So when you're talking about a full moon in general, you're talking about the truth. That's what I always say when I talk about a full moon. A full moon is when the sun and the moon are opposition each other, when the lunar cycle moves from being waxing to waning. So the full moon cycle, the lunar cycle reaches its peak, and perhaps we see the truth of the matter. We understand what things are really like, and perhaps we had been kidding ourselves before, but now it's absolutely obvious. It's clear. It's staring us in the face, and if you look at this particular full moon, I mean, let's just think about Sun in Virgo opposition Moon in Pisces. Sun in Virgo is an earth sign. Likes things to be straightforward, likes things to be sort of obvious. The surface appearances are what count. But the Moon in Pisces represents an emotional subtlety. We can't just be focusing on surface appearances. We have to sort of understand the emotional side of something. So, I mean, always, at the time of this particular eclipse, at this time of year, try to use one's sensitivity. Surface appearances can tell you something, but they cannot tell you everything. Now, this eclipse is special because Uranus, Mercury, and Venus, as I've just shown you, are all tied up with it. So we've got kind of half the planets are involved in this eclipse. And so when you're dealing with Uranus on the eclipse, Uranus is a planet of explosions, earthquakes, revolutions, and it is quite possible that it really brings about substantial changes. But things aren't necessarily quite the same. It's not just about having a realization, seeing the truth. The truth could be devastating. Again, I'm not necessarily talking about things at a personal level. It's perhaps the truth about what is going on in the world. Things are starting to come to a head. If you've got, for example, a trouble spot in the world, people have had assumptions about this trouble spot. They assumed it was going in a particular way, and then suddenly, bang, full moon square Uranus. This is the implications. This is what you have brought about. This is what you have created. So, if you start a war, if you get involved in a war, whether it's Iran, Ukraine, Sudan, Chad, there's we often just focus on just Iran and Ukraine and Gaza. But there are other places where bad things are going on. I'm thinking particularly in Sudan. We don't really focus on Sudan so much. I mean, Sudan is a complete nightmare, and as I will suggest, maybe we should be looking at Sudan. I mean, I don't know anything about Sudan and Chad and that part of the world, to my shame. But we had just not been noticing something, and then suddenly it explodes in our face, and that is how this Uranus could work. But it could also be a deep realization. So aside from the global situation, we're looking at something and suddenly we get it. And when we get it, that first moment when we get it, it can indeed be a shock. Then there is a question of what midpoints this eclipse is on. So let's look at the 90-degree dial. So here is the 90-degree dial. And, there is Mercury, Uranus, Sun, Moon, all together with Venus making the opposition. Remember, it's showing an opposition because it's semi-square. On a 90-degree dial, a semi-square is shown as an opposition. So if we put the pointer on the Sun and we look at what midpoints it's picking up on. One midpoint that I certainly found rather interesting is the Saturn Zeus midpoint. So there's Saturn and there is Zeus, and this Saturn Zeus midpoint does seem to dominate. So what is Saturn exactly about, and how does it link to Zeus? I mean, Saturn is the planet of restriction, of perhaps things not working. Zeus, by contrast, is about sudden shocks, action, and in the Uranian school, remember, Zeus is a hypothetical planet, which was sort of developed by Witte at the beginning of the 20th century, I think in the early 1920s, and he saw Zeus as, it was about gunshots and explosion. It was also about machinery, and this might be about machinery not working, things being sort of messed up. And so when you've got a full moon on the Saturn-Zeus midpoint, it might be about delays. I mean, it might be about explosions because of things potentially malfunctioning. And so there might be an aspect to this full moon which is actually very frustrating. I mean, maybe sort of worse than frustrating. And looking at what Witter says about the Saturn-Zeus midpoint, he says about Saturn-Zeus oppression, anxiety, anguish, obstacles and hindrances in activity and work, to separate from or interrupt activities, losses while producing, breakdown of machines, fire losses in establishments, occurrences without consequences. And he talks about losses through fire, steam power, or fire. Fire. That's when you've got Sun on the Saturn-Zeus midpoint. And he also talks about Moon on the Saturn-Zeus midpoint as being about stage fright. But again, you've got fire losses. So he's making this association between Zeus and fire. And then you've got Saturn is about the losses. So this might say something about what happens during the time of this eclipse. And there could be some big explosion, big fire that catches everyone's attention. And then there is the issue of where in the world. Where in the world is this eclipse most likely to have an impact? So let's set up the astrocartography for the eclipse. So this is the precise moment when the eclipse happens from a zodiacal point of view, when the sun and the moon are exactly opposition one another. And we're looking to see at the time of that eclipse where in the world were particular planets on an angle. So here's the astrocartography, and you see this red line here. These are all the parts of the world where Uranus is conjunct the midheaven. So you can see that this line goes down through sort of eastern Poland. It goes through Greece. It goes through Libya. Goes down through Chad. So this red line is a potential area of maybe conflict. Things may not be entirely easy in this part of the world, particularly where you've got capitals. There you've got, if you set the chart for Athens, for example, you'll have Uranus on the midheaven. Likewise, for perhaps the Baltic states, you see this Uranus on the midheaven goes through the Baltic states. So who knows what's going on in that part of the world? I mean, we know it's got something to do with the Ukraine war. And then you've got this other line. This yellow line is all the parts of the world where the sun is on the ascendant. In other words, where the full moon is right on the ascendant. And so it goes through Norway, goes through East Germany, and down. And there is a convergent point here in eastern Chad, on the borders between Libya, Chad, and Sudan, where the Uranus line crosses with the sun, with the yellow line. So that might be a part of the world that we really have to think about. And going further east, I noticed that here is a line where Sun and Mercury are on the midheaven, and if we take this down, the Uranus line intersects here. Now, my knowledge of the geography of here is not too good. I mean, this is kind of Borneo, but in fact that links with Brunei. I don't know what's good. I don't know anything about Brunei. We know about the Sultan of Brunei, but maybe Brunei is somewhere that we need to be thinking about. What bad stuff can happen now? I don't know. I mean, probably nothing, but it's something that I certainly observed. So let's relocate this chart for some of those places. So here is the full moon relocated for Brunei. And so the ascendant is at 5 degrees 48 Sagittarius. So that means that Uranus is exactly on the descendant, and we have got the moon, the sun exactly on the midheaven, the moon exactly on the IC. So this full moon might hit Brunei. I'm afraid I didn't have the time to look up what actually is going on there. So that might say something about an event in Brunei. It may say something about the political system in Brunei. That might be just a part of a world that we really need to watch out for. So if I was in Brunei, if I was advising the government in Brunei, I don't think I would be, but if I was, I would have suggested that they need to be careful, certainly over the weekend and probably for the next month, because eclipses can last a month and longer even. I mean, perhaps this particular eclipse does seem to be especially dramatic because of its involvement with Uranus. And talking about Chad, so there's a town in northeast Chad called Fada. Now, I believe that in northeast Chad, you've got a situation where the Sudanese, there's a civil war in Sudan. I don't really know very much about the situation, but there is a spillover, and you have got a lot of sort of militias, and I think you've got drones over Chad. And so, we're not really thinking about it. We see the news reports, Chad, Sudan, drones, something going on. But it could be that with this full moon eclipse, something really happens in that part of Africa. Okay, maybe it still won't get in the news, but perhaps if you're living there or if you're in government there, it may actually be dramatic. And we already know that part of Africa is a trouble spot. And so with this eclipse, there it is, Uranus on the midheaven in Fada. I mean, Fada, it doesn't have to be Fada itself. I've just gone for some town in northeast Chad. Uranus is on the midheaven. The sun is on the ascendant. So that really does indicate that something important could be going on, or just could be developing. And thinking about places in Europe. So if you look at here's Prague, for example, the capital of the Czech Republic. So in Prague, Mercury is there's a Sun-Mercury conjunction on the ascendant, and the moon is on the descendant, and this reflects the fact that yellow line going through Europe. So Prague is a capital that is impacted by this. So that might say something about government. I know they've had recent elections, and there's a new prime minister who doesn't get on particularly well with the president. You have a prime minister who I think is sort of more sceptical about the war in Ukraine than his predecessor. And there is a disagreement there between the prime minister and the president. And given this chart, this might be what it's all about. I mean, Uranus may not be on the midheaven, but Uranus is certainly squaring the ascendant. So Czechoslovakia, sorry, not Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic or Czechia might be a country to be looking at, and then there's Germany. So if we set the chart for Berlin, like Prague, because Prague and Berlin are relatively close to one another, and that yellow line going through Europe, it sort of kind of links sort of Berlin and Prague. And so for Berlin, we've got a Sun-Mercury conjunction on the ascendant, and we've also got the moon on the descendant. And also we've got Uranus squaring the ascendant, like we had in Prague. And this actually links with the chart for the German federal elections. So at the beginning of last year, there were German federal elections, and at the time of the German federal elections, the Sun was at this is really interesting. This is for the opening of the polls in Germany on February the 23rd, 2025. At the time of the opening of the polls, the Sun was at 4 degrees 54 Pisces. Now, if we go to the, I think that in Germany the polls open at 8 o'clock, so I set that chart for Berlin. Doesn't really matter where in Germany, it's still going to be 4:54 Pisces. So going back to this relocated chart, you see the Sun is at 4 degrees 54 Virgo. This is exact. So somehow this full moon is linked with the federal elections which took place at the beginning of 2025 in Germany. Now, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but one thing we do know about Germany is that on Sunday the 6th, there are elections, there are local elections, there are state elections, and one state where there are elections is Saxony-Anhalt. And in Saxony-Anhalt, there is a fear in the establishment that the AfD, the sort of right-wing party in Germany, they're polling 42%, and there is a possibility that the AfD have an absolute majority in the Saxony-Anhalt legislature, and so we can set the full moon for Magdeburg, which is the capital of Saxony-Anhalt, and so like Berlin. There's nothing special about this, but like Berlin, going through East Germany, we've got sun on the ascendant, and we have got the moon on the descendant. So, and Uranus affected. So Uranus hits it. So there's something, I think, really brewing in Germany, which may well be connected with the results of this election. And going back to the astrocartography. So let's do an astro map for Germany. We'll just do it. Let's sort of home in on this. So there is. So here, in fact, so here is Germany. Here's Prague. So this is the Mercury conjunct the ascendant line. This is the line, all the places where the sun and the moon are on the ascendant descendant line, and so you can see that this line goes through Germany, but in particular it goes through East Germany, and in its East Germany, where the AfD is particularly strong, and so this may say something about the elections on September the 6th. So I think that Germany is definitely a country to watch, and I think that the results of the elections on September the 6th may kind of reflect the drama of this full moon eclipse. And finally, just a few sort of people and places. Here's a chart of Canada, July the 1st, 1867. Canada has got its Mars at 5 degrees 10 Virgo. And so what's happening is that this full moon eclipse is on Canada's Mars. I haven't really been following what's going on in Canada. That might be to do with conflict. It's Mars, aggression, something to do with Mars's with Canada's foreign policy. I mean, it is in the sixth house, so it could be something to do with public health. So if you're in Canada, you know, then full moon is on your country's Mars, and so you might think about, you know, what you might expect with that, and as sort of a couple of people. And in the US, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he has his Venus at 4.5 degrees Virgo. So again, the full moon is on his Venus, and does that say something about his relationships? His relationships with the people of California, or his relationship with, just someone in his family, but he might be impacted by the full moon. And Prince Harry's got his Mercury at 5 degrees 12 Virgo, so full moon on his Mercury. His Mercury's on the 8th house cusp. So I think this full moon, having Uranus square his Mercury, I did a video quite recently on Harry, and this full moon eclipse really could stir things up for him. I mean, it may make him actually very agitated. Notice how the Mercury is on his 8th house cusp, and the moon is on his 2nd house cusp. So that might suggest that the Harry has to think about things of a financial nature, but it also just could be rather complicated for him. And finally, there is Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, and he is a bit of a strong man. El Salvador, of course, has the second lowest crime rate in the Americas. He's done this by throwing a lot of people in prison, but it does seem to work. Who am I to comment on how Nayib Bukele runs his country? A lot of people in El Salvador are very happy with the way he's running his country. But nonetheless, he does have this full moon eclipse on his midheaven. That may well say something about his presidency, and maybe things won't be quite so easy as they have been, over the next month. Maybe there might be threats to his presidency, or his power might be undermined by something. So he perhaps needs to, kind of watch what he's doing. He has had Mars trine his midheaven, so it does pick up on his Mars as well. So whatever challenges Bukele has to face with that Mars, he's going to really want to address. In fact, he's got a lot of stuff at 4. Look at it. He's got Mars square Saturn, Mars square Jupiter, and so this eclipse really picks up on an important degree in his horoscope. So Nayib Bukele, I think he needs to be careful. Needs to look at what challenges he might have to face. And now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, August the 28th, 2026. Aries. The eclipse is here. Yes, it's a partial eclipse of the moon, and its impact can probably not be avoided. Now, as far as you are concerned, Aries, this eclipse may have a lot to do with the way you feel, and what might be perhaps interrupting you. It would be nice if everything was completely straightforward. You decide that you want to execute a particular plan, you go ahead, you execute the plan, everything is fine, no complications. But there could be complications, and the question is, where are those complications? I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with the outside world, with what other people are doing. It might instead be about your perceptions, or maybe the way you are feeling, and you might be feeling that things are not quite right, or in fact, you might be distracted. It's sometimes difficult for Aries to just, completely focus on one thing. You might start to worry about something else, or you might be aware of your own responses, your own emotional responses, because I think at the moment you're quite sensitive to what is going on around you, what other people are doing, not just what they're doing, but what they're feeling. So you might be trying to concentrate, but your vibes are telling you something else, and the question is, what is going on? Well, it is an eclipse. We've got the moon in Pisces and opposition the sun in Virgo, and so this eclipse might be about you starting to realize something. But to begin with, you're not quite sure what you are realizing. Maybe you're thinking, why exactly are you doing what you're doing? So you could be involved in something fairly straightforward, and you're putting a lot of effort into it, but part of you is feeling that you're not necessarily doing the right thing, that you're not in the right place, that maybe you're wasting your time. It just could be just this vague feeling, creeping up on you. And your first response, might actually be to do nothing. You kind of carry on, but in a sort of half-hearted way. But instead, maybe you should be looking for verification. And in order to find verification, you might, for example, say something. Ask people what they think. Is it just your imagination? And I do think that one way of negotiating this eclipse is actually to be quite communicative, because this eclipse is tied up with Mercury, and you can ask people questions. You might not want to ask questions. You might be worried about the response, but at the very least you'll get some clarification. Or you may find that you're going about things in the wrong way, or you get a different view. Now, it's possible, because Uranus is tied up with this eclipse, because you've got Moon square Uranus, Sun and Mercury also square Uranus, that you discover something. Perhaps you'd been just too subjective. You'd just assume that everything was going in one way, when in fact it's all going in a different way, and so you might get an early warning that you might indeed have been sort of wasting your time. Okay, I'm not necessarily indicating that you are wasting your time, but it is just a possibility. Just because something seems obvious doesn't necessarily mean that it is obvious, and maybe your feelings are doing you a favor. They're giving you an early warning that you're doing something not quite right, and a bit of fine-tuning on your part could make all the difference. Now, I have suggested that it might be a good idea to get external confirmation, but that doesn't mean to say that other people can be entirely trusted. Right now, certain other people could actually be quite confusing. They could sort of lead you astray, not because they're being deliberately deceptive or because they're lying, but because you misunderstand something. You misunderstand the signals that other people are giving. So in terms of relationships, I think it is a time that you do have to be quite careful. Don't just assume things. Don't assume that you have read another person correctly. Now, so far I've just been talking about the geocentric picture. Now, there is a heliocentric picture. When I do my astrology, I like to look at the heliocentric chart as well. It's because of a heliocentric chart is what happens when you put the sun at the center of the solar system. And quickly turning to the heliocentric chart, because I do think it is relevant to Aries. If you look at this, Mars is still quite close to a conjunction to Uranus, and Mars is tied up with Mercury, so you can see that there's Mercury's square Mars. Mars is but the Earth is moving towards a square of Mars. Now, these aspects are perhaps ongoing, but maybe the eclipse energy is going to bring it out into the open, and so there is another side to today, and I think it is the verbal side, which is certainly indicated by the heliocentric chart, and in fact it's indicated by the regular geocentric chart because of this eclipse square Uranus, and Uranus, as I think I've already suggested, might be the resolution. I think that today could be sort of complicated and misleading if you keep things to yourself. If you don't keep things to yourself, if you actively engage with the world, if you're not afraid of causing a bit of fuss, drama, upset, Uranus making a square to Moon, making a square to the Sun, because it is a T-square, and Uranus is kind of a resolution to the T-square. So if you say what's on your mind, if you're not afraid of causing an upset, well, you never know, because you just never know how people are going to respond. Then, I think that is, a really good way of using today's energies. But, one warning here is that, Uranus, is in a section of your chart that is connected with transport, particularly short distance transport. Perhaps going to places, places in a car. Short car journeys could be on a bus, could be by the train, by train. Yeah, but short distance transport, or short distance traveling could be rather frustrating, and there is a scope for being annoyed, maybe because there are delays, maybe things just going on while you are moving from place to place, Aries. So perhaps in terms of your journeys, any journeys you might make today, allow extra time, and don't put yourself in a position where you might get annoyed. And if you're driving, be extra careful, and don't be in a rush. That's another good reason to allow sort of extra time. So Aries, I'm not suggesting that it's going to be an easy day, but I think that provided you know what's going on, and provided you ask questions and you seek confirmation, then things shouldn't be so bad. Taurus. Well, Taurus, the eclipse is here. It is the main event of the day. In fact, if you're in the parts of the United States, the eclipse could have been last night, and this eclipse does put a fair amount of focus on you, in fact. Because this eclipse is very much tied up with Venus. I mean, Venus, Venus is your ruler, and if you look at Venus, okay, it might not seem that it's connected with this eclipse, but what's going on is that Venus is at 20 degrees 27 Libra, so that means that it's making a 45-degree aspect to the Sun. It's making an 135-degree aspect to the Moon, certainly at the time of that eclipse. And so the things happening today certainly could have an impact on you, and they may seem to be disturbing. I mean, not disturbing in a devastating way. It's just, Taurus, you have an idea about how you want things to unfold, but there may be other things going on which seem to be going in a different way. And so you might feel irritated, or you just could feel that you have to make adjustments, and I don't think that you want to make adjustments. You just want to carry on and do whatever's in front of you, and not be bothered by it. But I think that this eclipse is is a pressure, and it's telling you, it's just telling you about something that you perhaps need to know about. And as far as what exactly the eclipse is about, well, we've got the moon in Pisces, so this eclipse with the moon in Pisces might say a lot about your place in the world, how you relate to other people, how you relate perhaps in an organizational sense, if you're part of an organization, part of a group, and that's something you have to take into account. But your natural inclination at the moment, Taurus, is really to do things your way. You have an idea about how you'd like things to unfold, and additionally, I think that you're quite tuned into your creativity. Very important to you at the moment. I mean, the Sun and Mercury are both in Virgo. They're both in an Earth sign, and so you're able to enjoy yourself. Yeah, you can enjoy yourself, particularly when you're doing something useful that seems to be a fundamental part of who you are. And that's all well and good, but the problem is what happens if other people have other ideas, and some of the people around you just might be pushing you to do things that you don't necessarily want to do. And the question is, how do you deal with this? So it being an eclipse, you've got an opposition aspect, and somehow you've got to make sense of this opposition. You've got to accept that other people have their views, that other people cannot be ignored, but at the same time, you've got to respect your own creativity, because at the moment you really can do a good job, and you can do a good job if you're left alone, but the question is, are you going to be left alone? And so you have to negotiate this. And so the question is, how exactly do you do it? Well, one way of negotiating it is to actually just control your time. Your time matters, and you might sometimes feel that other people are in control of your time, but fundamentally it is up to you. How much time are you going to give to other people? How much time are you going to be putting into the things that you enjoy, the things that are important to you? And so it's perhaps a good idea to give some time over to other people, to listen to them, to give the impression that you are listening to what they're saying. And you don't have to just do exactly what you're told. And in that way you can sort of get through and sort of manage the day's energies. And of course, Venus, your ruler, is in Libra, and so there is a place for being reasonable. After all, Libra is the sign of the balance, and the concept of harmony can be very important to this sign. And so what you perhaps need to do is give the impression that you're accommodating, give the impression that you're able to listen, and that impression can be perhaps only half the truth. You at least show some respect, but you don't show so much respect that you are compromising your fundamental self. Now, another thing about this eclipse is that it's very much tied. It's very much tied up with Uranus, because Uranus is square the Sun, Uranus is square the Mercury, and when you've got this exact eclipse and you've got the Moon at 4 degrees 4 degrees Pisces, you've got the moon is square Uranus, and as a result of some of the events going on today, and we might be talking about some kind of realization, you get a feel for money, because Uranus has been in Gemini for some time, and with Uranus in Gemini, it might be a time, Taurus, when you're thinking about your financial situation. You're thinking about the money that's coming in, and perhaps some money going out as well, and you might have an insight about your own finances, and this insight may come about through your observation of other people, how they are treating you, and how you are responding to them. And something just might occur to you. Perhaps there's an aspect of your own finances that you'd been neglecting. I mean, it might be an opportunity that you have been neglecting, or it could be a way in which you had been sort of spending too much money, perhaps spending too much money on other people. And it just occurs to you that you could make a change, perhaps quite a big change, with Uranus squaring the eclipse. And if you make that change, then I think that your finances, could get a boost. Whether it's because of extra money or because of your finding ways to save money. I think that overall, I think that could be quite useful. And finally, Taurus, I know that your sign has a reputation for being reliable, doing what you honoring your promises and so forth. But you don't want to be too reliable. No, you don't have to be sort of unreliable just for the sake of it. But it just could be that maybe certain people have taken you for granted. They've assumed that you're going to do something in a particular way, and it's just easy to fit in. But you are an individual, and there may be a situation where you feel you have to be unreliable, if only just to demonstrate that you really are a unique individual. Gemini. Mercury is very much tied in with this eclipse, because we have got this partial eclipse of the moon with the moon in Pisces, Sun in Virgo, and Mercury in Virgo. In fact, Mercury is making a conjunction to the Sun. We had the exact conjunction between Mercury and the Sun yesterday, but still very, very close. And Mercury is additionally square Uranus. So I really think that this eclipse is a big deal for you. And if we look at the chart with your sign on the left, we notice that that means Uranus is on the left. Uranus, there's Uranus in Gemini, squaring the eclipse, and indeed squaring Mercury. And this eclipse is in mutable signs. Moon in Pisces, mutable. Opposition the Sun in Virgo, mutable. And you've got Uranus also mutable in Gemini. And so I think this eclipse really could have a direct impact on you. Now, you might feel the pull and the pushes as well. For example, you might like to do things in a particular way. I mean, you can be quite stubborn right now. I think you can. I mean, stubbornness is not a word that one normally associates with Gemini, but at some level, you're quite happy where you are. You kind of feel that you've got it sorted out to an extent. It may not be perfect, but you've got a way of being, a way of living, and maybe you don't want to mess with it. But there are forces out there which are pushing you, and those forces might be represented by the moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces opposition Mercury in Gemini at the same time when the Sun is conjunct Mercury in Gemini. There are forces out there which maybe want your attention. It's not enough for you just to be in one place, to be happy in your world. You're being encouraged to go further and perhaps to make better use of your various talents. You can't keep everything to yourself. And I think in many respects this eclipse is actually pushing you to go further. And I think short term, Gemini, I don't think you want to go further. I think that, as I've said, I think you're happy where you are, but you don't want to be complacent, and it could be that this eclipse is kind of shaking you out of your complacency. You're being told that this is not quite good enough. You may be doing a good job. It may be great, but it could probably be a lot better. If you made the effort, if you perhaps went into places that did feel rather uncomfortable. You're not in your element, but you need to give it a go. You need to perhaps embrace the moon in Pisces, challenging Mercury in Virgo, perhaps being aware that not everything is straightforward, not everything is simple, and maybe where there is confusion, particularly emotional confusion, there actually could be an opportunity. And if you have an opportunity to, for example, work with the public, to have a high-profile public persona, maybe absolutely not what you want to do right now, perhaps even the last thing you want to do, but it might actually benefit you, especially if you're a career-minded Gemini. There are things you want to do, you want to push yourself, but in theory you want to push yourself, but you'd rather just stay where you are. But I think that that is the nature, I think, of this eclipse. And when we look at this eclipse, it is essentially a T-square, because Uranus is involved with it. Uranus being squaring the sun and the moon, and Uranus in Gemini. So Uranus, in a way, is the answer. And Uranus, of course, has been in Gemini for some time, and Gemini is really being stirred up, and Uranus is the individual. It's about you standing up for what you believe in and what is important to you, and that could be the best way of negotiating pressure. So if there is pressure to do something, or to come out of your bubble, whatever it is, if there is pressure, it's not about either resisting the pressure or just completely accommodating to whatever the pressure is. It's actually about going further, and by saying, yeah, sure, you accept the pressure, but you're going to do it your way. And that's Uranus in Gemini. It's about you making it quite clear who you are and how you're going to respond to these sort of external forces. So, if someone goads you enough, they're pushing you to do something, you finally say, yeah, you're going to do it. You will do it, but you can do it in the Gemini way. And the Gemini way might not be what other people are expecting, but it's your approach, and I think that is going to be the best approach. And once you get into the swing of things, Gemini, I think that you can really have quite a forward-looking and quite optimistic approach. Okay, I'm not necessarily talking about today. It's Friday, it's the end of a week, and this eclipse, is still going to have to be sort of managed, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a dramatic event, but the eclipses are not just about one day or 1 hour. I mean, you might say, okay, if you're in the United States, particularly the Western United States, this eclipse was Thursday evening, late Thursday evening, and so you might say, oh well, it's done, eclipse is over. Well, no, not really. I mean, this eclipse could last for another 2 weeks, maybe another 4 weeks, and so when you look ahead, Gemini, think about how you can be original, how you can accommodate other people and outside pressures, but in your way. And so having that sort of individuality, and also being able to be original, but also having that vision and that optimism really is the way to push yourself forward. But just don't expect things to be straightforward. Be prepared to be surprised. And by the same token, I think you yourself can provide a few surprises. So, if we're positive about this eclipse, Gemini, I think actually it could be quite exciting. Cancer. The lunation cycle, of course, it always matters. That's what I tell you, quite a lot. And, some lunations are more important than others. We had a total eclipse not so long ago, was it 2 weeks ago? We had We had a total eclipse of the sun. But, that total eclipse of the sun, clearly in terms of what's been happening in the world, I think that total eclipse, was a big deal. But this eclipse, this partial eclipse of the moon, it also seems to be a big deal. In a way, it's a bigger deal than the total eclipse, and that's because it's so tied in with Mercury and Uranus. The eclipse is opposition Mercury, it's square Uranus. So for sure, that does stir things up, and being a careful Cancerian, looking after your own interests, this eclipse, at least to begin with, might seem, ever so slightly threatening. Feeling that there are huge forces at work which you don't necessarily understand. But really, Cancer, I actually think that you can deal with this. I don't think that this eclipse should be much of a problem, provided you kind of have some idea about what it is about. And part of this eclipse is about deciding, what is important and what is not important. I think that right now, Cancer, there is a lot of information coming your way. Maybe it's new information, you being told things, you just reading things. It may come through emails, it may come through what you're listening to. So it's coming your way, thick and fast. And there is a possibility that just might be sort of all too much, and that can be the dark side of Virgo, or perhaps an unfortunate side of Virgo. With the Sun and Mercury in Virgo, it can be about just a lot of factoids to deal with, and which factoid is the most important, and which one should you be ignoring, which one should you regard as being super important. So you've got a lot of working out to do, and if you're not careful, you just might not know when to start and where to end. But the eclipse is giving you a hint about what is important. The moon in Pisces, opposition the Sun and Mercury, is giving you an alternative view. And if you want to know what is important, Cancer, well, you trust yourself. Cancer is a water sign. All things being equal, Cancerians, they function on an emotional level. They function best on an emotional level. And so by utilizing your feelings and your sensitivity, you can start to sort of understand what really does matter. And you can then, get your priorities right. And I think you're going to be helped by the fact that the moon, having made an opposition to the Sun, it moves on and makes a trine to Mars. And, don't forget that Mars is moving through Cancer. It's moving through your sign. And so with the moon making a trine to Mars, Cancer, I think that this suggests that, you really are able to, assertively understand what this eclipse is about. Once you understand the pressure, and you see what's going on, you can take action, and maybe indeed you have to take action. So if you're just bombarded with things and you don't know quite what to do, you don't know how to respond, the best response in the end, after a bit of thought, might be to actually do something to really assert yourself. And through that self-assertion, I think that in the end, you can get good results, and you will be taken seriously. And at the same time, I think that you can communicate anything that is bothering you. Mars is now out of the first decanate of Cancer. It's now in the second decanate of Cancer. The second decanate of Cancer is ruled by Mercury. I think the first decanate of Cancer is ruled by Venus. The second decanate of Cancer is ruled by Mercury. And so there is a sort of a mercurial side to things, which provides a balance to the emotional aspect. And so I think that you can express your concerns, and perhaps you can express your frustrations, but you can do it in a way that is, very definite. You don't come over just being angry for the sake of it. No, you want results, you want answers, you want clarification. And if you insist on clarification, then I think you can get that clarification. I mean, that's one way of looking at Moon trine Mars. I mean, Moon trine Mars can also be a bit about you moving beyond the situation, and the situation you're moving beyond is in fact the eclipse itself. So the eclipse is not necessarily the be all and end all of today. It is more about you actually responding, and once you respond and you insist on answers, and you are quite demanding. I think you'll get what you're looking for, and perhaps you'll further benefit by the fact that other people might at times be quite confused. They might not know what's going on. So if you can be definite, then I think that would just make things so much easier, not just for you, but for everyone else. Leo, when you have an eclipse, it means that the sun is involved. By definition, when you've got a new moon eclipse, that means you've got moon conjunct the sun. When you've got a full moon eclipse, you've got the moon opposition the sun. In this case, we've got moon opposition the sun, and the sun is moving through Virgo. The sun is making a conjunction to Mercury. So it's a good idea to think about what that actually means. Sun conjunct Mercury. So sun conjunct Mercury, it means that you are right now doing quite a lot of thinking. Perhaps you're in the mood for talking as well. There are things perhaps that you would like to discuss, and once you get into the swing of things, you have got a lot to say for yourself. And additionally, because the Sun Mercury conjunction is in Virgo, you might be quite focused on money. It might not be something you want to be focused on, but the Sun and Mercury, they are in an Earth sign, Virgo, and Virgo can be quite into detail. And okay, you might not want to be into detail, but you can see the details, and you can see which details matter, and maybe you feel that you're slowly but surely starting to sort things out on a material level. But then the eclipse comes along, and you have the moon, opposition the sun, opposition Mercury. You have the sun making a square to Uranus, and this eclipse could represent a feeling of confusion. That you wanted things to be straightforward, and they're not being straightforward. There are other things to consider. So as far as money is concerned, you perhaps start to see that things are perhaps not quite as straightforward as you thought. Maybe you thought some money was going to come your way, it was going to be easy, or you were going to just work out something administrative of a financial nature, and it's just more complicated than you thought, and it's just perhaps it feels like other people are making complications, or that just could be the way it is. There is fine print to consider, and the eclipse just makes it all clear. it makes it all clear in a way how unclear it is. And your first inclination might be to kind of throw up your hands in despair. This is just not what you wanted. Absolutely not. But it's important that you don't panic. You're quite able to deal with it all. And so this full moon, it does show you the truth, perhaps, about your own finances. It also tells you the truth about the complexity of other people. People are not necessarily straightforward, and you have to sort of accept them as they are. And it can be sometimes rather shocking. After all, this eclipse is square Uranus, so there's a lot to consider, perhaps because of other people. Other people, they do things their own way, and at least on the surface, they can really sort of mess things up for you. And then you find that because of that, because you're dealing with these kind of complications, you then find that it's just difficult to get things done. I mean, I think you want to get things done, but the harder you try, the more difficult it is. And this is not just about other people. It might be, for example, things connected with machinery. You perhaps want to do something quickly with a machine. I don't know what it is. Maybe something around the house, some machine you're used to, that you're used to using. It could be a machine you're using at work, or something that you'd perhaps taken for granted, and it just doesn't necessarily work as you had expected. And the temptation is to sort of panic and just press lots of buttons, or to just do something you've never done before. And in the process, you could cause a problem. You could actually damage the machine because of your irritation with the machine when it doesn't immediately do what you were expecting. So if you find that machines are malfunctioning, or appear to be malfunctioning, don't be too hasty. Don't be in a rush to sort of take the back off and pull everything apart. It may just be something very simple. Perhaps taking the time to read for example, the instruction manual. So that's what you might want to do. But it's just another way in which today could be frustrating, because I think you'd like things to be straightforward, not just at a financial level. I think at all levels. And when it's not straightforward, you might just get annoyed, and additionally, other people might not be particularly straightforward. What's going on at work, it might not be straightforward. So what do? I mean, I think that again, you don't overreact, and you try to work out what's going on. And that might mean that you have to just ask some questions if you don't understand something, if it's not making sense. And there'll be a lot that's not making sense, and you shouldn't feel that with this eclipse, that it is all about you, that you're the only person having issues with this eclipse. I mean, everyone at some level is feeling rather uncertain, and at the time of the eclipse, a few things are clear to begin with, but nonetheless, the truth is available. So if you look hard enough, you can find the truth of the matter, whether it's to do with money or a piece of technology. Whatever it is, the truth is there. And once you find it, I think that things will run a lot smoother. Virgo. It's an important day, astrologically. There are certainly things going on. And what we have is we have the Sun making a conjunction to Mercury in Virgo. Remember, we had that aspect yesterday, Sun conjunct Mercury. This Sun-Mercury conjunction is still in operation, but Mercury is starting to move away from the Sun, and the Moon makes an opposition to the Sun and Mercury, and the Sun and Mercury are making a square to Uranus. In other words, we have a T-square. We also have a partial eclipse of the moon. And so this partial eclipse is right across the main axis of your chart. The Sun and Mercury in your sign, Moon in your opposite sign, and we've got Uranus making squares to both in Gemini. So piecing it together, in a run-up to the eclipse, I talked about yesterday, Thursday. I don't know what kind of day you had Thursday, but I thought for many people in the run-up to the eclipse, things might not have been entirely easy. And so this run-up to the eclipse, you might have felt that you didn't really understand things, that something was rather overwhelming. I mean, after all, the Sun was conjunct Mercury. Mercury was combust. I mean, Mercury is still combust, but having that exact conjunction, that was quite a heavy-duty aspect. I did suggest that there are two ways of dealing with it. It might be that yesterday you had a powerful sense of purpose when that Sun-Mercury conjunction was exact. And the question is, can you maintain that sense of purpose? Particularly now you've got the eclipse, and there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to take on board. Now, one way of looking at this eclipse is to look at it in terms of the other, because the moon is in Pisces, the moon is in your opposite sign. And when you're talking about an eclipse, you might be thinking about the truth. I mean, that's just a standard way of seeing a full moon. Full moons in general, certainly when you've got an eclipse of a moon, of course, the eclipse of a moon is a special type of full moon. And so it's a time when you really may be able to see the truth of a matter. You see how things are working, and you may not like what you see. That's absolutely possible. And this particularly applies to other people, to certain relationships that you're involved in. So perhaps, Virgo, you should think about the whole pattern of your various relationships. And I'm thinking about sort of various one-to-one relationships. One-to-one relationships can be about anything. It's not necessarily close or enduring one-to-one relationships, but wherever you're dealing with another person, where you've got where you've got continuous dealings with another person, then this full moon eclipse is giving you an insight into what the relationship is really about, and whether it's useful. It might be that it occurs to you that something is coming to an end. I mean, that is a way in which an eclipse can work. A full moon eclipse, you see the truth about another person. Perhaps they've been useful in the past, and perhaps now their use is starting to wane. I mean, I know that sounds a bit unpleasant and transactional, but we're all transactional. It doesn't matter what our sign is. There is a transactional nature to the human experience, and you shouldn't just continue throwing resources into a relationship which is no longer working for you. And it could well work the other way. It may be that from another person's point of view, you have had your day. Perhaps you and someone else have are both finished with one another, and it's in both of your best interests to go your separate ways. But eclipses and full moons. Full moons in general, not always about endings. They can actually be about a development. So, a full moon, this full moon eclipse might be about you realizing, what someone is all about, and you understanding that they are actually of real value. That maybe you want to spend more time with them. So there can be a positive side to the eclipse. It's not just about people falling out with each other, but this particular eclipse is quite dramatic. I mean, it is tied in with Mercury, so because Mercury is tied in with the eclipse, because Mercury is conjunct the Sun, opposition Mercury. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry, because Mercury is conjunct the Sun and Moon is opposition Mercury. You do feel it. You can feel the pressure, and I think that you can very much feel the difference between yourself and other people, and not just between yourself and other people, between you and the rest of the world. It's there's you, there is your particular zone of control, and then you've got everything else, and so. You're trying to negotiate that, and so what do you do? What do you do if there's pressure? And some people might experience this eclipse as pressure, but this eclipse does provide an answer, and the answer is Uranus, because again, this eclipse is not just about Sun, Moon, Mercury; it's also about Uranus, and Uranus does. Create quite a dramatic impact. It certainly stirs things up, and the question is, how do you deal with Uranus? And it might be the case at Virgo that you either see Uranus as being an unstable external factor, something that is messing you up. I mean, that's not the right way to see Uranus, but I think you could see Uranus like that. But an alternative approach is to own Uranus. And that is, I think, very much the best approach. So I've talked about Uranus quite a lot recently. Uranus is a planet which is, of course, about revolutions, earthquakes, dramatic change, and it's also about doing things differently. And that's how you should see Uranus. It's about you being a real individual. Don't be fooled by the standard textbook interpretation of Virgo. Virgo is the service sign, the helping professions, doing things for other people. You're always there. That's not what this Uranus is all about. If you own it, it's about you being able to do things differently, and being a real individual, being prepared to stand up as an individual. And if you stand up as an individual and you make it absolutely clear who you are, it might well be that certain relationships naturally resolve. Because in relationships, there is sort of a natural tendency, isn't there, to try to be reasonable, try to be compromising. Perhaps you don't want the other person to find out what you're really like. It's especially the case in a new relationship. But the thing is, if you are yourself, if you really demonstrate who you are, the good side and perhaps the bad side as well, then yes, the situation will resolve very quickly. You will be able to see how another person responds to you. You'll be able to find out how you respond to them. And what could take months to develop can perhaps develop in a period of days. Straight away, the relationship might be over. It would have been over anyway. But by expressing at Uranus, you're accelerating things. It's kind of like accelerated evolution, even. And so I think there may be a real value of being not just unique, but militantly unique. Not being prepared to compromise. You're saying, this is who I am. If you don't like it, too bad. And so that might be how Uranus manifests, and how Uranus could actually be very useful. And remember, this is a full moon eclipse, and the full moon eclipse is about the truth, and the truth is something to be welcomed. You understand the truth. Other people understand the truth. There should not be anything that is hidden. And in fact, through the dynamics of this eclipse, you may at some level get an idea about your purpose. And it's not just about other people. When you see perhaps the changes going on, perhaps some kind of inner revolution working its way through, you actually start to become aware of what you can do differently, and not just differently for the sake of it. What is intrinsic to you, and so through this eclipse, might emerge your fundamental, unique destiny. So if you've been asking yourself questions, what are you supposed to be doing with your life? What is your real direction? What is the right approach? I think this eclipse can be, really dynamic, and it can really propel you forward, and the end result can be really, really optimistic and positive, and you can get a real sense of the future. And I think you can be very positive about this future. Sure, there's going to be disruption, but I think that disruption is very much part of the process. Libra. There is quite a lot going on today. I mean, obviously, we've got an eclipse, and this eclipse does have an impact on Venus. Its impact on Venus may not be immediately apparent, though. So if we look at what's going on astrologically, we've got the sun at 5 degrees Virgo, moon, depending on what time of day you're looking at, but the eclipse itself was at 5 degrees Pisces. So that eclipse is making a 45-degree aspect or 135-degree aspect to Venus. So it has a dynamic impact on you. And in the first instance, that dynamic impact, Libra, might be somewhat disturbing. I mean, you might like to ignore the eclipse, pretend it's nothing to do with you, but it kind of is bothering you. And I think that Venus is in Libra, and with Venus being in Libra, you would like things to just be, fairly straightforward. I mean, that's how you want it to be. I mean, I think you have a plan. You're feeling, relatively good about yourself. I mean, after all, Venus is in your sign, so things are okay. But then there's something else at work, represented by this eclipse, which may indeed be quite disturbing. And this disturbance may have nothing to do with the external world. It just could be a realization. You just see something for the first time. Or it could just be about how other people are behaving, how other people are maybe responding to you. You look at the response and you're thinking, well, that's not so good. It could be better. Maybe you need to realign yourself. But it's absolutely possible that your own thoughts, your own realizations are pushing you in a particular direction, and it could be that something is trying to get in touch with you. Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, and Venus sesquiquadrate Uranus could represent inspiration. Inspiration knocking on the door. You think you've sorted it out. You think you've got it all in order, but not quite. There's something you've forgotten. Maybe you have underestimated the power of the spiritual. Some higher part of yourself is trying to get in touch, is trying to urge you forward, is trying to get you to maybe change direction. Not necessarily in a huge way, but I think there is this concept that things could be done better. That you have to make the most of what you've got, and the eclipse is telling you that there's still work to be done, and you kind of need to make sense of your own inner feelings. So, if you have a feeling or you have a response, you might, for example, have a response to a particular place. Maybe it's a place you've been to lots of times before, but this time round you just get a feeling. It may be a feeling of deja vu. It may be a feeling of just nervousness. You just feel, this isn't quite right. And so if you get that kind of feeling, then you've got to make sense of it. And I think that this eclipse will allow you to make sense of it. And once you've made sense of it, it might occur to you that you're dealing with a place that you maybe shouldn't go to anymore, but it's not doing you any good. It might have an impact on your health. Yeah, do think about your health. I should emphasize here that I'm not talking about anything sort of medical. I'm just talking about health in a sort of a general psychological, spiritual sense. How you are feeling, your general sort of well-being. But you might get sort of insights with this eclipse about what is bad for you. It could be, that certain environments are bad for you, certain people are bad for you, but certain food is bad for you. You've got to do some further research. Don't just take my word for it. It's something that you have to consider. You can look it up, but full moons are about realizations, and you perhaps it occurs to you that you've been doing something for a long time, consuming something for a long time, going somewhere for a long time, hanging around with particular people for a long time, and it could just all be sort of undermining you. That I know that sounds bad, but it's good that you have this possibility here, Libra, of just being aware of understanding what actually is good for you, because there's another side to it. I've talked about what might be bad for you, but there are other things which really could be life enhancing, could really make you feel happier, fitter, healthier. And I think that Libra, you fundamentally know what that is, and you actually are developing a natural instinct for your own well-being. And I think the truth is now available. Again, in a general sense, don't forget, I'm not talking about anything medical here, really, but you know what's good for you. And I think the full moon is telling you what's good for you, or at least providing that information. And it means making some changes, perhaps changes to your daily routine, which you perhaps been putting off. You just haven't thought it was worth the effort, but now it's kind of obvious, and so you make those changes. And I think that pretty quickly you'll see the benefits. And it's not just about the physical and the psychological, and it's also about the spiritual. And you create the right routines for yourself, and that in its way could create some kind of spiritual change, in a quite a positive sense. You getting a sense of who you are, where you're going, and feeling some sort of spiritual comfort that you have aligned yourself with the universe, and you are finally moving into the right place. You don't want to be in the wrong place. So in fact, place could be very important. Some places work for you and other places don't. And in this light, you might just get some inspirations about what is the right approach, what is the right strategy. And so to sum it all up, Libra, this eclipse reminds you that it is a time to be looking after yourself at the level of the physical, and also the psychological and the spiritual. Scorpio. A lot of excitement about this partial eclipse of the moon. And Yeah, this partial eclipse, is going to affect everyone. I don't think, Scorpio, that you need to be, excessively concerned about it. I mean, this eclipse, affects some people more than others. I think, all things being equal, Scorpio, I don't think it's necessarily going to have a massive impact on you. But, it might remind you of your fundamental, individuality and, what it is that really does matter to you. And think about what you enjoy, what nurtures you, and by the same token, think about what is undermining you. And it might be, for example, that certain people are undermining you, and I'm not really talking about one-to-one relationships. I'm talking about society at large, or certain groups you're involved with. Maybe you've been spending too much time worrying about the wrong groups and the wrong people, and with this eclipse, you might feel rather estranged from society, and you want to kind of do things your way. And I think that is probably the right approach, to take a fairly sort of individualistic approach. It is all about you, and not in a way that is selfish or egocentric, but you do need to put your own interests and your own journey first. And it's perhaps a time to be, asking questions. Remember, I mentioned that, Mars has just moved into the central decanate of Cancer. And the central decanate of Cancer is ruled by Mercury. And so Mercury, is a sign which is connected with, thoughts and ideas and perhaps a certain amount of logic and rationality, even though Mars is in a water sign. Mars is in Cancer. And so Scorpio, this does give you an opportunity to, think things through, especially as the moon is making a trine to Mars. I mean, in a way, we can go on about the eclipse, but in a way, the moon trine Mars is perhaps the most significant aspect of the day. I mean, I know that it sounds quite minor because the moon moves quite quickly, but the moon trine Mars is quite empowering. And the moon and because the moon is making a trine to Mars, it sort of has a grand trine connection with Scorpio, because you've got moon in Pisces, you've got Mars in Cancer, and then of course you've got Scorpio, which is your sign. And so the eclipse itself might be a rather confusing influence, where you're just aware of some of the stuff that's holding you back, but then moon trine Mars allows you to move quickly, respond quickly. And so if you are being held up, or you feel that something is just preventing you from moving, I talked about this, I think it was yesterday. I mean, I used the analogy that perhaps you were like some kind of eagle tied up in fishing line or in netting or whatever. But I'm urging you to, this is a time to escape, to fly free. And again, with moon trine Mars, we also get this idea of flying free. And flying free is about doing, what is important to you, what you want to do. And you might come up with all sorts of reasons and stories why you can't fly free, but you have the capacity. You really do. And so that's perhaps the right way of dealing with today. As far as one-to-one relationships are concerned, I mean, I don't think they are necessarily the kind of issue that I've been referring to. I mentioned that society in general could be a problem, having to deal with other people as a group. Yeah, in terms of one-to-one relationships, I mean, I don't think there's a huge amount going on, but there's still a possibility that certain people are confusing. It's very difficult to know what they mean, what they're trying to communicate, and it's easy to make mistakes. You can reach conclusions, in your Scorpio way. You are very sensitive, and you certainly can pick up what someone is trying to communicate, but you still might sort of make a mess of it. So, sensitivity on its own doesn't give you the correct answers. So if you have a feeling about what someone is trying to convey to you, a feeling about, who someone is and what's important to them, you can't necessarily trust that feeling. And so maybe there's a case, Scorpio, for keeping your distance. I mean, not for a huge amount of time, but it is. We do have an eclipse as well, and additionally, Venus is tied up with this eclipse because Venus is making a semi-square sesquiquadrate to this full moon for this full moon eclipse, and so other people may not be entirely straightforward, especially even including on a one-to-one level. So maybe Scorpio, it is a time for just thinking about yourself and putting relationships on the back burner, at least for the moment. Sagittarius. There is really, quite a lot going on. Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and it being a mutable sign, you enjoy variety. I mean, that is part of the very nature of Sagittarius. You don't like to just do one thing for too long. You want to be able to, keep moving. And the more variety, the better. And this eclipse is in mutable signs. In fact, you could say that this eclipse for you, Sagittarius, has a certain Grand Cross feel to it. Now, I say it has a Grand Cross feel to it because we've got Uranus in Gemini, we've got a mutable sign. We've got the moon in Pisces, another more mutable sign. We've got Sun-Mercury conjunction in Virgo, third mutable sign. And the fourth mutable sign is Sagittarius. And there isn't really anything in Sagittarius, unless you count true Black Moon Lilith. I'm sure there's some random asteroid or several random asteroids in Sagittarius. If you look hard enough, you can always find an asteroid, or a dozen or 100 asteroids in Sagittarius. Depends how much you want to go. But let's keep it simple. There isn't really anything in Sagittarius. In terms of this chart, the chart for today, you could say that Sagittarius is the empty side of the Grand Cross. Grand Cross with part of that cross which has nothing in it, but it's Sagittarius, and so that means that you really pick up on the energy of this full moon eclipse. You feel its power, and I think that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It kind of depends how you respond to it all. Now, I've been over the last couple of days talking about the fact that the Sun and Mercury have been in Virgo, and I've seen that as really being quite a good thing. Because with the Sun and Mercury in Virgo, Virgo is an Earth sign, and I think Sagittarius, it has been a time when you have been really able to project yourself in a material sense. So that could relate to your work, to a job, to your plans. Even if there's no job, no work, but what you're doing constructively in a material sense, and it also links to your ambitions. People have all sorts of strange ambitions. They can have ideas, fantasies, but they could all come to nothing. But with the Sun and Mercury now in Virgo, Sagittarius, you just have an opportunity to really, bring things down to earth, and that has been something that has been developing. But this eclipse does perhaps create a bit of tension, because we have the moon opposition the Sun and Mercury. I mean, that is moon opposition Sun, full moon. This particular eclipse is this particular full moon is an eclipse. So that is providing you with a different view. So yeah, you might have all sorts of ideas about how you want to progress. You may even have the material means to progress, but the moon in Pisces is indicating an alternative. It's suggesting that there is something else that you need to be thinking about. And because it's moon in Pisces, we might be talking about something of an emotional nature. It could be relating to your family and your home and your ideas about security and so forth. Okay, I know that the Sun and Mercury are in Virgo, in an earth sign, so you are already having some respect for your sort of material security, but maybe we're talking about sort of emotional security as well. You've got to make sure whatever plans you have are rooted. They are grounded in something emotionally secure. And yeah, that might relate to your home, your family, to your past, whatever is important to you. I mean, you can't just move forward without thinking about the past. And maybe this full moon eclipse may be kind of reminding you of it. It may just be 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. If it's always 10 steps forward, 0 steps backwards, you might become disconnected with your supply lines. If one wants to use a sort of a military analogy, you go too far, you invade a large country, you finally realize that you're out of supply and you're in trouble. So always think about your supply lines, and we're talking about your emotional supply lines here. And additionally, Uranus is tied up with this full moon eclipse. Uranus is in Gemini. It's in your opposite sign, and that could say something about other people and how other people are behaving. And in the first instance, this eclipse might make you think that certain people are a law unto themselves, that certain people, through their reactions and their general approach, are, well, not necessarily being particularly helpful. They may be being disruptive. But just because someone is being disruptive or appears to be disruptive, it doesn't mean that they're not in their own way quite fortunate. Maybe you need a little bit of disruption. Someone has a different approach from you, and you don't like it. But this is an eclipse. This is an eclipse, which is about finding answers, and maybe by seeing what someone does, accepting that other people, that other people, and perhaps someone in particular, really is quite unique and maybe even revolutionary in their own way. That can actually help you move things along. And in some respects, Uranus is the answer, because at the very least we've got a T-square, Sun, Mercury in Virgo, opposition the moon, with Uranus squaring both, Uranus on the T, and Uranus might be some kind of solution. You reluctantly accept that someone has a very individual way of looking at things, and you also accept that someone else's way might actually be the right way. I mean, you don't have to take what anyone says completely at face value, but really try to understand other people's position. And if someone has a position or a set of views which is surprising, even shocking, don't dismiss it out of hand. And in general, Sagittarius, I think that your ability to get on with people is actually quite good today. Even people who seem very different from yourself, people who may appear to be disruptive, if you actually talk to them, you try to relate to them, then I think that you might find that you've got something in common with them. Capricorn. It may be a question of just keeping calm and carrying on. We have quite a lot going on astrologically. It is this full moon eclipse, partial eclipse, and I'm sure a lot is being said about it. It's seen as being, a very dramatic event. But from your perspective, Capricorn, it may not be so important. I think you can deal with it. It might be distracting, but is it going to be a completely revolutionary event that's going to change everything? Well, not necessarily, at least not for you. So that might be the advantage of just a sort of keep calm and carry on approach. Maybe other people will have their dramas, but as far as you're concerned, I don't think that a huge amount changes. Not really. So perhaps it's something that you can even ignore. Perhaps you should ignore it. If you ask too many questions, if you try to understand, what is going on, what other people are up to, what other people are thinking and feeling, then Capricorn, you might, end up, finding out about things you just don't want to know about. Maybe it's just disturbing, but just because it's disturbing doesn't mean it's useful. It just might be just irritating and distracting. And what you don't want to do at the moment, Capricorn, is to get distracted, particularly if you're getting distracted by things which are unpleasant, things that you don't really have to get involved in. I mean, it is possible. Capricorn, right now you might find yourself putting energy into things which just are not very helpful. They might not be wholesome. They might not be healthy. You may be sort of gravitating towards the unpleasant side of human nature, not your nature. I think maybe someone else's nature. But is it necessary? And so I think there is certainly merit in the idea of just getting on with it. You're a sensible Capricorn. Maybe you shouldn't even be worrying about what I'm talking about. You listening to me, at least today, could be just a waste of your time. Maybe maybe you should just be doing what you need to do. Don't be distracted. Don't look at YouTube. People like me are perhaps the very things you should be avoiding. So, I mean, that's one way of looking at today. But if you're continuing to watch this video, or at least to watch what I have to say about the subject of Capricorn, then I think that you don't want to be completely taken over by things which appear to be serious, which appear to be sort of above your head, perhaps, to perhaps be even quite sort of otherworldly and complicated, and perhaps they have a philosophical bent to them. Yeah, it all sounds far-fetched, complicated, perhaps interesting, but fundamentally it's a waste of your time. And what you should be trying to do today, Capricorn, is really bring things down to earth in whatever way you can. And bringing things down to earth is not just about looking at the way things are in terms of their surface appearances. It's also listening to your feelings. I know that sounds a bit of a contradiction, because feelings are not very earthy. They're more associated with the sign with the water signs. But with the moon in Pisces, that does represent your feelings, and if you feel that something is a particular way, perhaps you can trust your feelings. And so perhaps coming down to earth with your feelings is just trusting your first feeling, keeping it simple. So if you have a feeling about something or someone, then Capricorn, there's a very good chance that your feeling is right, and you don't need to pursue the matter any further. But still, the moon does make a square to Uranus. In fact, the whole eclipse makes a square to Uranus, and this does mean that if you get too involved in things, then there might be sort of shock waves, and those shock waves could have an impact on the fundamental structure and routine of your life. Being a Capricorn, you like to do things in a particular way. You want to know where you are. You have a good sense of timing. What you should be doing at particular times of day. You want to be well organized, and if you really get involved with the energies of the eclipse, if you get involved with what other people are doing, then that is going to have an impact on you, and you're going to have to make changes. And these changes, might not be entirely welcome, but okay, they might be important. It might be that you find things out. If at the moment, for example, Capricorn, hopefully, with Venus moving through Libra, you're quite focused on your sense of direction, on your ambitions, things perhaps going on at work. But Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. In fact, Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to the eclipse, to the moon. It's making a semi-square to the sun. And so that could suggest a fair amount of disruption in terms of work, or if you're looking for a job, you might become aware of new facts which you're not necessarily very happy about. But once you've opened Pandora's box, then you've got to accept the situation, and you've got to accept whatever's in that box, and you have to just deal with sort of maybe even escalating chaos, which goes back to what I was saying right at the beginning. Keep calm and carry on. Don't get too distracted. I mean, that is the simple approach. Maybe you've just got a choice. Keep it simple, and don't open too many boxes. Don't open any boxes at all. Just go through the day, and don't deviate from the path. That is one approach. But if you do deviate from a path, if you start to tie yourself up with the energies of the eclipse, and other people are perhaps going to carry that energy, if you do start doing that, then things could actually get complicated very quickly. Okay, maybe they're getting complicated for a reason. Maybe you have to make changes for a reason. But what I'm really saying today is that, at least on the surface, you do have a choice. You can have a fairly straightforward day, or you could have a day which could actually be quite complicated. Aquarius. I can't help but talk about the fact that we have this eclipse, this lunar eclipse, which is an important event. I think that this eclipse is more important than the lunar eclipse we just had. So we had 2 weeks ago, the solar eclipse. So 2 weeks ago we had a solar eclipse, and that solar eclipse was in Leo, was in your opposite sign. But things have developed, and so we've got another eclipse. This eclipse, for everyone in general, I think is perhaps a more serious event. It's because it's tied up with Uranus. So we have got Moon in Pisces, opposition the Sun in Virgo, and Uranus is on the T, making squares to the Sun and the Moon, and Mercury is involved, and this eclipse. If you want to get tied up with this eclipse, if you want to get involved with it, I mean, I don't know whether you have to get involved with it. I was just talking to Capricorn, and I was kind of suggesting to Capricorn that there might be a voluntary element to this eclipse. You could just make an effort to stay out of trouble and regard the eclipse as someone else's problem. Maybe that strategy will work. But if this eclipse does have any impact, as soon as you start to get involved with its energy, then it might well have something to do with money. There's, because the moon is in Pisces, the sign following Aquarius. So there could be a realization about money. You see how things really are. With money, you can kind of have a vague idea about money, and what's going on financially. That could be about money that you owe, financial arrangements that you're involved with, the way money is coming in, the way things are being spent. This would particularly be the case if you're tied in with a load of financial obligations. All these sort of monthly repayments or monthly payments. One payment doesn't matter. You just you pay something small. For example, if you're a member of this channel, which I've just been pushing the memberships, that was $4.99 plus costs, and I don't think $4.99 is so much to pay. But then it might just be just one other payment, and then you've got lots and lots of payments. If you have to pay lots and lots of people $4.99, well, it might get to be too much, and it might have got out of control. And so there could be a realization here that you have overcommitted yourself, that you're spending money on things that you don't need to spend money on. All these monthly repayments, death by monthly repayment or death by monthly subscription. And so that is a way of looking at today, suddenly realizing what's going on. And so with this full moon eclipse, I think it's a good idea, Aquarius, to be financially aware. Perhaps even force yourself to be financially aware, because when we're talking about eclipses, we're dealing with the truth, seeing things to what they're really like. And I think that this eclipse can actually be, I won't say inspiring, that's kind of a bit too positive, but certainly revealing. And so if you have a revelation about your own finances, even if it's a bad revelation, I think that that could be quite useful. And in fact, it could really stir you, because this eclipse is tied up with Uranus. Uranus, the moon is making a square to Uranus. Sun and Mercury are also making squares, and Uranus is a planet that doesn't rule Aquarius, but it has a relationship with Aquarius, I think. And so with Uranus tied up with this eclipse, the things you understand, even if the things you understand are quite mundane, may actually really push you, to try something new. Even if it's about money, maybe you could be radically reorganizing your life in such a way that money isn't such an issue. Maybe there's sums of money that you don't have to spend, but instead you can use your creativity and your own resources. When I say resource, I don't mean financial resources. Your resources in terms of your abilities, your creativity, and your general talent. And so I think that this is perhaps a time when you can start to really think about what you can do, and it sort of moves beyond money. Because Uranus is so important, and Uranus is in Gemini. It's a sign which has a natural sympathy with Aquarius, which is your sign, and of course Uranus is still making a trine to Pluto. You may then start to think about what you can do, and you mustn't think that you are just being sort of tied up in knots by obligations, particularly financial obligations, and financial obligations can seem to limit your freedom of action, limit your creativity, but it needn't be the case. And I think, Aquarius, if you handle this correctly, you can really use this as a springboard to increase financial security, particularly as the moon is making a trine to Mars. So what happens is, the moon, it makes the opposition to the sun, then it moves on makes a trine to Mars in Cancer, and that Moon-Mars trine may not be very exciting, but for you, Aquarius, it is about you being able to get yourself together and being actually quite down to earth, but also hard working and focusing on what needs to be done. So as far as this eclipse is concerned, I think it might help you in terms of getting to grips with your finances and perhaps making better use of your fundamental abilities. Pisces. I think this eclipse could be quite important for you, Pisces, because it's a Pisces eclipse. It's around, 5 degrees, where is it at? 5 degrees Pisces, is it 4 degrees, is it 4 degrees 54? Isn't that where this eclipse is? Something like that. Here's the chart of the eclipse. Its eclipse is 4 degrees 54 Pisces. So this eclipse it really does have an impact on you. You've got the moon in your sign, and its opposition the sun, which is in Virgo, in your opposite sign, and Uranus is square the moon, Uranus is square the sun, Uranus is also square Mercury. So it could be a moment of truth where you actually start to understand what is important and where your priorities are. And this could also relate to other people. I mean, after all, moon opposition sun is across the main horizontal of your chart. Virgo is your opposite sign, and Virgo is a sign that is often connected with relationships in the Piscean chart. So if you've got a full moon in Pisces, that might give you searing insights into another person, what that person is really like, and what that person's role is in your life, or indeed what that person's role should be in your life. And you have the fundamental sensitivity to understand this, because the moon is in Pisces, the moon is in your sign, the moon is in a water sign, and so that does really enhance your sensitivity. So if you have a feeling about a person, then probably your feeling is correct, and perhaps you should be sort of acting on that feeling. And it might be that the feeling is entirely positive. You kind of recognize that maybe someone, for all their faults, is the right person to have around. On the other hand, it just might be clear that something is reaching its end, that you might get an insight into someone's personality, and you maybe don't like what you see. Now, I'm not saying that you should give a blank check to your own emotions. Just totally trust your emotions. I mean, you've got to have some safeguards. Sometimes Pisces can get carried away on their feelings, but there's something about the way you feel right now that could give you accurate information about another person. And it might not just be about another person. I mean, we've got the Sun and Mercury in Virgo, your opposite sign. That is, Virgo represents everything that you are not. It represents everything that is outside your immediate sphere of interest. And so you have an insight into how ongoing developments are having an impact on you. And so it's making things much clearer. Now, you might not want to see the truth, whether it's about a person or a situation, but I'm just telling you that the truth is available. And the question then is, once you see the truth, what happens? And this might be where Uranus comes in, because Uranus is it's square the moon, it's square the sun. This full moon eclipse is very, very tied up with Uranus. When I created the thumbnail, I think I called it Explosive Eclipse, because it's Uranus. Uranus is an explosive energy. And it's, okay, it might not be a literal explosion, but it's just a sudden awareness, and it can be quite a dramatic awareness. And once one thing changes, well, something else could change as well. And so it could be, for example, that if a relationship changes, then that might change some other aspect of your life. Now, Uranus went into Gemini for the last time, earlier in the year. It stays in Gemini until 2032. And, if one wanted to characterize this whole period, Uranus stays in a sign for approximately 7 years. If we wanted to characterize this period, Pisces, it might be about changes in your home environment. You might want to change where you live. You might want to, it might be about decoration. It might be moving things around. It might be about moving where you live. It might just be going to a different place, deciding that you've just had enough of where you lived. It doesn't matter whether you're renting or whether you own the property. It just could be that, you have had enough. It could be about property in general. It might not even be your own home. So if you are involved in real estate, or you happen to own lots of houses, or more than one, then it might say something about your attitude to a particular property or a particular strip of land you own. And it just maybe all be linked with another person, or you have an insight. Maybe someone tells you something, you have a realization, and as a result, you want to make changes to a home, maybe to your home, and that might be minor. It might be so major that you want to get rid of this home or move out of this home. So do think about how this eclipse could impact your fundamental security. And I don't mean this, by the way, in a bad sense. I think this eclipse could actually be very positive. It could help move you on. And at the same time as this eclipse, the moon is making a trine to Mars. So the moon, the eclipse the moon was at 4 degrees 54 Pisces at the time of the eclipse, but then it moves on, and you can see that the moon is at 11 degrees Pisces and Mars is at 11 degrees Cancer. So that moon trine Mars allows you to tune into who you are, what you enjoy. So there's certainly a very positive side to it, and thinking about what you are able to create and what you do best may actually be linked with this eclipse as well. So perhaps you have a realization with this eclipse, and as a result of this realization, you do something new, you do something different, and it is an essential expression of who you are. And I think that actually could be very positive. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 4, which is youthful folly. Now, this hexagram is a bit of a problem, and it is a problem because it's potentially an indication that you should not be asking the question. So one of the problems of any oracle, whether it's a tarot or the I Ching or maybe Astrology, is that one can ask the question once and twice and 3 times, 4 times. Once then you get into a pattern of just asking the question again and again and again, and it's just getting you absolutely nowhere. Every reading is worse than the previous one, and it just drives you crazy. I think, in my opinion, the tarot is worse than I Ching in that sense. But you can do it with the I Ching, yeah. Once you keep, and then at a certain point, the I Ching gets sick of you, and it's just saying enough. Just stop asking this question. And what the I Ching says, with youthful folly, something like, I told you once, I told you twice. You want to ask a third time? You're wasting my time. And that perhaps is what the youthful folly is saying. So you may be coming into this reading asking a question which you absolutely know the answer to. There's something you want to know about. You've been told before, and you need to accept it. And it's kind of interesting that this is happening at the time of a full moon eclipse, and that the full moon eclipse is about the truth. The truth is evident. And so why do you need to consult the I Ching? Why do you need to even look at this section of the video when you already know the answer? So perhaps the I Ching is telling you to just stop watching this video now. You don't need to know. Just, you know the answers. You can just work on it now. So that is an approach. But if we try to interpret youthful folly, then we would say that you're possibly dealing with a situation where you don't fully know what's going on. It might be about inexperience, something you perhaps haven't done before, and you're still getting used to it, and you're making mistakes because of that inexperience. And there's nothing wrong with it, because if you try something for the first time, it's almost inevitable that you're not going to be perfect, that you're going to need help, you're going to have questions that need to be asked, and at the very least you should be aware of that. Youthful folly might also be telling you something about other people and how other people are responding. It might be other people who are the foolish youths who don't know entirely what they're doing, and perhaps in that sense you should be able to have some tolerance of people who just don't know as much as you. So it would be a good idea to identify where that youthful folly actually is. And we have one line moving. We have the fifth line moving. Now, the fifth line in the I Ching tends to be a fortunate line. Not always, but it tends to be fortunate. And the fifth line is talking about someone who really is inexperienced, who doesn't fully know what they're doing. And now that might be you. You're embarking on a task where you know that it's you don't really know enough. You don't feel very sure, or it could be about someone else. But the key thing is that there is a certain humility to the fifth line. It's about someone who doesn't know what they're doing, but who knows that they don't know what they're doing. So they do have a certain humility. They are prepared to ask for help. They are prepared to be taught. They're prepared to learn. And really, that makes all the difference. The fact that there is no arrogance here. It just makes things much more straightforward. So, if you are dealing with something that you don't know about, perhaps you're trying to give the impression that you know what you're doing, there's no harm in asking for help. You might feel stupid asking for help, but it's okay. It's absolutely okay. No one's going to hold it against you. It could also be about someone else who doesn't know what they're doing, is inexperienced, and likewise you perhaps can provide some assistance. So it's very important with youthful folly, particularly with this fifth line moving, that everyone puts up with everyone else's mistakes and inexperience. But the key thing is to accept that one is not an expert, and where possible to ask for assistance and ask for some kind of guidance. And with the fifth line moving, it does mean that we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 59, which is dispersion. So you can see the the trigrams of this. So the bottom 3 lines represent the abyss. It's an aspect of water, the rather dangerous aspect of water. One aspect of water is the lake. The other aspect, this aspect, is the abyss, the sort of the bottomless pit. And then the top 3 trigrams represents the air, it's wind. So you kind of get the image perhaps of wind over the water, maybe a dramatic wind over the water, sort of a hurricane, the kind of hurricane that causes dispersion. Everything gets blown everywhere, just kind of like being stuck in a washing machine with dispersion. So it seems a really difficult situation. So we move from a situation where we don't really know what we're doing, and things get more difficult. And before we know it, the rains have come and everything kind of gets washed away. And it seems as if it is really quite sort of quite disastrous. But the I Ching suggests that in the end it's okay. I mean, you could say that the decks are being cleared, and if the wind just picks us up and throws us in the air, it puts us down somewhere else. And it may indeed be that as a result of this dispersion, this chaos, we land on our feet. We actually have made progress, and this kind of links with the fact that we've got this full moon eclipse. So maybe this full moon eclipse, is. I mean, I think this full moon eclipse is actually pretty dramatic. I really do. And I think it could throw us all over the place because Uranus is involved. And maybe the I Ching is kind of reflecting this, that things will change. There may be moments today when we really don't know where we're going, where we don't have any sense of our footing. We may feel that we are in a washing machine, but in the end the storm clears and the clouds clear, and we can survey our surroundings, and it might well be that things aren't so bad. We might even, in a strange way, have made some progress. And that's it. That's all I've got to say for today. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. As you might know, I've started channel memberships. For channel memberships, you get an extra video every week. The video will last at least 15 minutes, and memberships cost $4 with a single level, $4.99 plus costs. That might be local taxes, it might be platform fees, so it might actually end up as being more than $4.99. And the latest video I put up was on the sun-moon midpoint. I think all of us should know about our sun-moon midpoint. At least work out where our sun-moon midpoint is. See if there are any planets on the sun-moon midpoint. And I think if you're doing a horoscope, I really think it really does matter to look at this midpoint. Anyway, in the last video I put up, I did talk about what it means to have planets on the sun-moon midpoint, and why it's important in astrology. Anyway, thanks again for watching this video. I hope you have a good day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.